Hey, it's Nate Zielinski with the Big Game Hunting Series brought to you by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Today's episode is all about digital scouting. Now, I know you've been following along the series. Again, it's the Big Game Hunting Series, and we've been talking about all facets, walking you through step by step the process of becoming a more successful big game hunter right here in Colorado. And with that, scouting is absolutely priority. If you want to increase your success on anything that you're hunting, scouting and education is the true answer to create that success. So again, the more scouting you do, the more successful you're going to be when it comes time to being in the field. How do we do that? We always talk about scouting at least 60% of your available days. I know that sounds crazy, but if you scout 60% and only hunt 40%, your odds are going to go through the roof. And today, it's all about the digital aspects of scouting. Now, years ago, this necessarily wasn't as big of an option. We just didn't have the capabilities. But now, literally at our fingertips with our devices, tablets, computers, we have so much intel available at our fingertips to where we can do so much scouting from the comforts of your couch or sitting at work on a break. There's a lot of availability, and we want to walk you through that process, what to look for, what you're trying to obtain, and what your overall goals are. Now, I'm going to grab a couple things here, but with this, you have a lot of capabilities as far as your resource. So probably one of the most simple things, and one of the things that probably everybody has access to if you have a phone or you're watching this on a device, is the simple free availability of Google Earth. Now, Google Earth is not necessarily going to show you every little nook and cranny. It's not going to have some of the information as far as who manages the property, who owns the property. But again, you can kind of dig into the Google Earth stuff and you can get a lot of information. And more importantly, it gives you a lay of the land. So you're going to see so much. It's free, it's readily available. So that is an awesome opportunity. So Google Earth, great option. You also have something that I use a lot of, and this is onX Maps. This is cool because it tells a lot of the information. So it tells you public versus private. It tells you what the property is. You can do a lot of overlays. So much stuff here under map tools. You can break it down to where the map shows you everything. So now you can click on that. It tells you what big game unit that is. So what GMU it is. So you can jump to your big game book and understand, what the regulations are for that area. It tells you public versus private. Who owns it if it is private. So you can dig a little deeper and understand that private ground. So the onX is a really good tool. Again, it's great because you can kind of carry it everywhere. Then you have a lot of other software, stuff even brought to you by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So a lot of cool stuff there. So you can go to their website and get a lot of information. So many different things. And literally there's probably dozens, if not, 50 or 60 options for digital capabilities, satellite imaging of how you can digital scout. So I'm not necessarily going to go into all the options between the software and the program brought to you by Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Google Earth, and onX. Those are the platforms that are probably the easiest and most readily available. Now, I will say, on the platforms that I use most, I'm a huge fan of the Google Earth and the onX, simply for the fact that I can look at it on my computer, my tablet, but I also can look at it on my phone. So with that being said, I can be on my phone and I can draw maps. I can draw lines and trails. So I can literally build a plan on my phone while I'm digital scouting from home. And then when I go out in the field hunting this fall, I literally can have that with me. So I can take out that device, and now the same thing I've been staring at, through the digital scouting process, now I can look at in the field. I can say, oh man, I'm off my trail that I designed. So that's kind of cool about those platforms on the Google Earth, and especially the onX side, is I can take it with me. So that's a huge plan. Now, that's kind of the concepts of how we scout. Now I'm going to walk you through the true process of exactly what you're looking for. So keep that in mind. This is exactly what you're looking for when it comes down to the digital scouting process. One of the biggest questions everybody asks, when do I digitally scout? When does this start? Honestly, the true and cool benefits about digital scouting, you can do it 12 months out of the year. You could be scouting for licensing and opportunities that you might be doing in multiple years. So honestly, you can use this stuff anytime. But in reality, in the steps, in the Big Game Hunting series, this whole series that we put together, I am doing most of my digital scouting and my emphasis on the digital scouting prior to June 1st. So honestly, from the time that I'm really starting to plan my hunts in February, March, April, May, that's the time that I'm spending the most opportunity behind these devices and studying everything I possibly can about the upcoming hunt. So when? Anytime before June 1st. All right, step one. What's the first thing I'm looking for in a digital scouting process? First thing I look for is access. So I obviously know where I'm going to be hunting. I know the general game management, things like that. When I look at a unit, I look at the entire unit, because even though I might have a little honey hole or a spot that I intend to hunt, I always want to have plan A, B, C, D, E. So, you know, all of a sudden weather hits, or there's other hunters in the area, or there's a fire, whatever the case may be, I want to be able to adapt and immediately go to a secondary plan or a third plan without missing a beat. So I scout the entire unit. Whether I plan on hunting portions of that unit or not, I scout the whole thing. And my number one goal, like I said, is access. When I say access, I want to know every road inside that unit. So whether that is pavement, whether that's dirt, whether that's a very rough off-road, I want to know all those access. So I want to know if those roads are always open, if they are seasonally closed, if they are so rough they get closed, but I want to know every road in the unit. So number one, scout that out. Know every road. The goal of the access is to eliminate all excuses. We want to eliminate all surprises. So when we go out hunting, we never want to have a surprise. At no point do you ever want to be out there in the field and all of a sudden, you know, come around the corner and you've been hiking for 5 hours and you hear an ATV coming up a trail and you're like, I thought I was, you know, where no human's ever been. I had no idea that road was there. Again, we want to know every access into that area. So every road is my number one goal. I want to know everywhere where I can drive. So this is going to be good for access points going in and out of my hunting areas. This is going to be a good thing to know, to where if you get an animal down, you can make a plan to where even though you went in from here, now upon harvest, is it easier to take that animal out somewhere else due to terrain, due to contours. So again, you want to know every access. So every road in that unit you have to know. Upon access, the next thing we look for is kind of trailheads and parking. Still majorly a part of the access route, but upon that, where can I and where can other hunters access their hunting ground? So, you know, is it a situation where we're just pulling off the side of the road and hunting? Are we parking on a trailhead, hiking up the trailhead and dispersing from there? But upon access, obviously roads, I also want to know where parking, trailheads, and all of that is. Then also I will follow those trails and know where every major trail is. So trails can be used for everything. Obviously, hunters are using trails, but also just general people utilizing the outdoors. And probably one of the biggest things that we're seeing more and more in Colorado is people enjoying the fall color. So your leaf looking is obviously a growing sport. So I want to know every trail. So upon hunting, number one, I know where every trail is, because trails a lot of times are going to allow you quicker access getting deeper into the forest. So again, you know, if you're just bushwhacking, it's great. But upon being on a trail, sometimes you can cover a little ground a little quicker. So I want to know where every trail is, but I also want to know where other hunters are going to be. And upon, you know, hunting in September, early October, if I know there's going to be a lot of other people, you know, even non-hunters in the field, I want to know where they're at. So if they, you know, cause a situation of the animals avoiding those heavily populated areas, where the animals are going to go. So again, no surprises. The goal of access, eliminate all surprises. At no point do you ever want to be out there in the woods and again hike for miles and come around a corner and there be somebody hiking on a trail and you're like, I didn't know that was there. The digital aspect, you want to know where everything is at. So number one step, jump on here, jump on onX, jump on Google Earth, jump on the software and find every road. Pavement, dirt, off-road. Find every trail. Find every parking lot. Know where you can get into the woods, where other people can get into the woods. It's going to be a major part of it. All unit-wide. Study it all. Every road, every trail, every access into your unit. Step number 2, or the second process of what I am trying to obtain through the digital scouting and digital aspects of education. I want to know public versus private. Now, this is a big one. So, number one, we want to make sure that we are always, taking our part in legal obligations to make sure that we're never trespassing. We want to be on public property or property that we have access legally to hunt. So, number one, we have to know the public versus private, so we're always in, good standings and within regulations of being on that property that we're allowed to be be hunting. So that's number one. That's a major violation. One of the top ticketed offenses in Colorado is trespassing. So again, make sure that you are on good grounds. I think so many people rely on fences or signs, but that's not how the law works. Landowners do not have to fence their property. They don't have to post signs. It's your responsibility as a hunter to make sure that you know where you are at. So obviously, in regards to this, we want to know public versus private for that reason. But that's not really the true reason I'm talking about it. The big reason I'm talking about it is simply for the hunting aspects. When I look at private versus public, I want to know where those areas are at. So like on this map right here, I have 100%, this is state land. It's huntable property. It's actually a state wildlife area. Then I have private ground around it. Then I have some forest around that. But you have to know your public versus private. Here's why. When you're out there scouting, a lot of times we see animals in all these areas and we get excited, right? We're out scouting in June, July, August. And then come hunting season, when we actually start putting pressure on these animals, we start engaging, pursuing in a hunting fashion these wildlife. Sometimes when they feel pressure, they will abandon a little bit some of their daily patterns and they will move to private where they don't have that pressure. So I want to know where my public versus private is, to where, number one, I can sometimes anticipate that slight migration towards those areas. And if you're a hunter that doesn't want to deal with that, know the public and private and just avoid it altogether. I know so many hunters that deal with that, where they build great patterns and they have, a ton of wildlife on the state property, and every day, they're on here at night, and the second it starts getting light, those animals migrate, and they hop the fence a couple of minutes before, legal shooting light, back onto the private. It can get very frustrating. And a lot of times there's nothing you can do about it. So you really want to understand those aspects. Now, when I'm doing my research, obviously I'm going to understand what's public versus private. I take it one step further. So if I have a big private ranch, that butts up against national forest, I'm going to look at that situation. I'm going to research it. So I'll actually look up the private, who owns it, and do a little research. You can even contact them if you would like. And I always just try to find out some answers. What I'm mainly looking for is on that private property, do they hunt or do they not hunt? So if you have a big chunk of private property that's near you, if they are hunters, it's actually a very good thing, simply for the fact that if they hunt that property, they will be hunting themselves, so it will put equal pressure. So hunters will be hunting the public, which puts a little pressure on the animals, not in a bad way, but again, they know you're there. But if there's pressure coming from the private ground, it neutralizes it, and your animal's patterns remain the same. Nothing changes. So as much as you might be pursuing the animals one direction, they'll get that same pursuit from the other side, and it really neutralizes everything out, which is a good thing. It meets a common ground, and you're going to have a great hunt. If you contact or do some research on that private ground and you know that there is no hunting whatsoever allowed, those animals are going to utilize that private ground much like a sanctuary or a preserve. They know that they are not receiving any pressure or any pursuit from hunters on that private ground, and therefore we're going to spend a lot of time there during the hunting season. That's where it really becomes a negative effect, hunting right near that private. I know a lot of people get excited, like, oh, there's private, nobody hunts it, there's going to be animals everywhere, but those animals learn real quick to avoid the public ground where there is pressure near that. So if I'm hunting an area to where, like, this whole section of private, if there is no hunting over there, absolutely nobody hunts, I know these animals come hunting season are going to want to come over there, making it very defeating and very tough hunt for me. So research it. Know the public versus private. So obviously you're always in good, faith, and you're always in a good situation where you're always gonna, be law abiding. But more importantly, understand that private to where is it gonna cause an effect? Is it gonna neutralize things out because they hunt, you hunt, not a big deal? Or if it's a situation where they do not hunt and those animals are gonna migrate there, causing a tougher hunt for you. So step 2, public versus private. Know it all and research it to know exactly what you're dealing with. All right, step number 3. This is probably one of the biggest ones for truly creating your success. This is more on the side of actually creating a technique and your harvest in the field. When we talk about this, we talk about a daily migration. Keep note of this, write things down. Daily migration. Almost on a daily basis, if not 100% on a daily basis, all your big game species, your elk, your deer, your pronghorns, your bear, pretty much everything that you're going to be pursuing is going to go through the daily migration of food, water, and bedding. A lot of our animals are going to be active at night, and regardless, during the day, your animals are going to go from a situation of almost always bedding down and resting at some point. Now, you could have an elk that might spend, everything from 8 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. in their beds. You have other animals that might spend less time in their beds. But regardless, on a daily basis, these animals are going to bed. When they bed, they're going to bed in thicker cover, things where they feel safe. So it might be a dark section of pines if it's very warm outside. If it's a very cold day, they might be in real thick, tight aspens to where the sun still gets through, but they still feel like they're safe. So regardless, bedding, it's going to happen every day. It's going to be in thicker areas where the animals feel safe and comfortable and feel like they can lay down without having pressure or a predator approach them. So they are always going to bed. They're almost always going to drink. Now, this can vary a little bit due to climate. So climate and temperature, I should say. If it's a situation where you're hunting, bears, mule deer, whitetails, and elk in August, September, depending on that situation. Now it's pretty much always September with that September 2nd start. But regardless, they're thinking pronghorn. If you are hunting in the early time of the year where the temperature is hot, these animals are going to drink every day, if not multiple times a day. So the water is a major thing. They're always going to go and drink. Now, as you get into October, November hunt, that's going to be a situation more to where they might get enough moisture off the grass they're eating and snow on the ground to where they might not actually go to a true dedicated water hole as often. But again, they are going to drink, they are going to need to hydrate, they are going to be looking for that moisture. So water still comes into play during the entire season. And then lastly, obviously they're going to eat every day. So your daily migration is going to be some sort of pattern that takes these animals from a feeding situation to a bedding situation to a water situation. Now, most animals are always going to pattern. They get in the same type, migration on a daily basis. Certain animals will have the same routine of going from food to bed, and then they drink when they get up. I've seen other animals that want to eat, then immediately drink, and then they bed down. Regardless, this is your information. You have to find those daily migrations. So before I actually get out in the field and look for this, you can use your maps like right here. So, right here, we have big open meadows. Those big open meadows are going to support a ton of grass. So I know anywhere where that sun's coming through, these more open areas, I'm going to have key areas where I'm going to have food. So I have green, great grass in those areas. So I know I have a bunch of food in this area. Then I'm going to look for those bedding areas. So I make sure I have thick enough cover to make sure these animals feel safe. Right here, I have real dark timber. That's kind of a big peak right there. You can see the contours and they tighten up down here. So that's going to be a key bedding area, really dark timber. I know that those animals are going to find safety in that area. That's going to be a key bedding area. Then you can look right here and I have a stream. So I have water that's even marked on the map. So I have water coming through here. I have some aspens right here and I kind of have a drainage. So I would assume, since I have aspens, they're always associated with water, and that drainage right there, I'm going to assume that that's going to be a water source as well. So right in that key area, I know on a daily basis that these animals are going to go from the bedding areas to the food to the water. Again, that pattern can change. That's up to you. But I am scouting all of this type situations now to where when I get in the field, I'm utilizing my time the most. I'm not just pulling up here in June and just randomly walking around and burning up my usage days. I want to make sure that I am efficient in all aspects. So through digital scouting, I'm going to do all that right now. I'm scouting. I'm knowing where this is at. I'm doing this unit wide. So I'm just going to pick it apart in little chunks, and I'm looking for key areas. Some areas might not have all of this, but this particular one, I know I have great food, I know I have great bedding, I have great water. Sometimes if those are spread out too far, miles apart, it's not going to be as beneficial to those animals. But when it's tight like that, a half mile, and you have great resources for food, water, bed, that's an ideal situation that when I go out in the field scouting, I want to look at and check out. So again, daily migration, food, water, bedding, find key areas like that through digital scouting to where you make the most of your time when you get in the field. All right, next step, we're going to talk about zones. When I say zones, this is kind of more, again, on the focus side of the true hunt. Now, I'm going to spend all summer scouting. I'm digital scouting now. Come June, July, August, I'm more boots in the ground. I'm physically out in the field, with the animals, scouting, doing everything I need to do there. But with that, we always talk about zones. So with zones, we just talked about access and trailheads and parking, but I always break things down into zones. So I say, okay, I've taken a truck or a four-wheeler, an ATV, whatever. I've taken it as far as I can go, and I am parking. Every hunter would have to park here. There's no more access, past this point. So everybody's parking here. Then I always say, okay, I'm going to say my zone 1 is a 2-mile radius around this access. So, whether I'm parked at the bottom hiking up or at the top hiking down, whatever the situation is, I always say my zone 1 is 2 miles. Most hunters will be able to access that. Obviously, terrain varies and everybody's athletic ability changes and varies. But regardless, my first zone, I always say, is 2 miles. The reason I do this is because I'm going to find patterns. Sometimes it might be a couple hundred yards from access, from a road, from a trail, from parking. And I know those areas. I scout them. I learn the animal's behavior in that zone. But in the effect or in the situation of hunting season starting and there becoming a lot of hunting pressure right there, sometimes these animals will move away from that pressure and just go further away. Now, the animals' patterns will stay the same. This is something that a lot of people don't understand, but they will. If you have a particular elk that, his daily routine with his cows, so that entire herd, they always feed first thing, and, they're one of those herds that likes to bed down early. So if they're feeding early, maybe 7:30, 8 a.m., they're going to bed down. They bed down till early afternoon, and then they drink. Those patterns, the timing at which they bed down, the timing at which they drink, how they interact as a herd, that will stay the same. So even if it's in zone 1, 2 miles from their access, and all of a sudden there's pressure and they move to 4 miles out, their patterns will stay the same. So it's still beneficial to learn those patterns. Sometimes just the areas that they're doing that pattern in will change slightly. So I always scout zone 1, and I always say, hey, 2 miles from this access, this is the patterns. I'm going to learn every daily migration within this two miles. And then I'm going to take it one step further. I'm going to go to zone 2 to where all of a sudden this is, 4 miles from that access. Again, take that protractor and just make that line and say, hey, this is zone 2. Again, this is a fallback to where if the animals feel pressure here, they're going to go to here. And through digital scouting, you can learn that. So maybe this key area we just talked about, where I have the bedding, the food, the water, this is in zone 1. Now I'm going to find something very similar to that a little further away, to where I say, hey, if these animals abandon, right here, where are they going to go? Again, our goal through digital scouting is to answer everything. No excuses, no surprises. So all of a sudden, I'm scouting these and all of a sudden they disappear. I don't want to sit there scratching my head and be like, where'd they go? I want to immediately, like, they're not here. I know that the pressure is coming from this direction. They abandoned this. I'm sure they went to, my zone, or, zone 2, and I'm going to execute plan B, and I'm going to go find those animals and just continue that process. So regardless, when we talk about zones, you need to scout various zones. Don't scout everything as a whole. Break everything apart so it's very consumable. So zones 1, 2, and 3, and that way when you get out there, if these animals move, you don't miss a beat. You just adapt, go to where they're at, and continue those patterns. All right, now we're going to get into the little bit more technical side of things. With that, it's not what you're thinking. It's not digitally, technical. It's just more about the hunt itself. So when I'm scouting this, I'm taking it one step further. So I'm looking at all these elevation lines. I peak out there at 96, 94, and I drop down. But you're going to be able to see contour, elevations on all of these maps. So I'm studying that as well. So when I look at a map, I'm saying, okay, my access is from whatever, this road right here. This access comes to right here. I'm parking right here. Then I have a little trail. Then the trail peters out. And then I'm just free to go from there. But if I access from here, I'm looking at the contour lines and I'm understanding what the wind is going to do. Now, when we say wind, this is almost an entire seminar itself, but with wind, you have thermals and you have true wind. So you have a movement, a directional, a west wind coming from, the west, it's blowing air. Then you also have your thermals, which is just sucking due to temperature. Regardless, I'm understanding that. So the average hunt, more than likely your wind is going to suck down in the morning. It's going to switch mid-morning. It's then going to suck up to most of the day. And then that later afternoon, evening, is going to switch and suck back down. So with that, I am scouting these elevations, not necessarily because I don't want to plan my hike, but but I'm studying it to where I say, okay, if I access here, but I know that I have a tapering thermal, I know that if I'm going to go up into this area, I know my wind's going to be perfect in that morning hunt. So I plan that. So when I'm scouting, I'm making notes of all the elevation to where when it comes back to access, the first thing we talked about, I know that when I access, I'm going to have a good idea of what my thermals are doing to where I can make a flawless approach. I can make a flawless retreat and come back to where I'm never hurting anything when I'm in the woods. So many hunters kind of miss the concept of understanding their wind, and I promise you, one of the hardest things to deal with, and the thing that hands down has ruined more hunts for anywhere in the country, but especially here where we have so many thermals and so many contour changes, your wind and getting sent out and getting smelled by the animals is hands down the hardest thing to deal with as a hunter. So studying this is one of the biggest things out there. You need to know where you can access where the animals cannot smell you. How do you get back to the truck without blowing it out? Because again, you can do all the scouting all summer. You make one wrong move, let those animals smell you, and they are definitely going to move on to zone 2 or 3. So controlling your wind is everything. Now, since we're hiking around, a lot of times the clothes are not going to do it. We just have to play the wind, and knowing your elevation is the best way to do that. So look at all your access points and then look at the contours. Try to get a good concept of what the thermals and the winds are going to do, and plan your access and your routes due to that. All right, now lastly, the thing we kind of talk about is wrapping it all up, bundling it together. Your concept, no excuses, and just no surprises when you're out there. So think of it this way. How many times have we been in the woods, out hunting, and you see the bull of a lifetime? You see your big elk, you see your big mule deer, bear, pronghorn, whatever the case may be, and all of a sudden that animal like dips over a hill, and in your head you're like, he's gone forever. And how many times have you charged over that hill, and all of a sudden your wind's wrong, and you blow the animal out and you never see it again? It happens, right? We've all made those mistakes. But through digital scouting, I want you to make notes of everything. You're literally a student back in school trying to obtain all the information. So if you know that unit, I want you to have education. So if all of a sudden you see that animal dip over that hill, I want you to think in your head, hey, I've been studying this. I know on the back of that hill there's a big section of dark timber. I bet you that animal is just bedding down. Now you have that intel to where you say, let's not go over there. Let's stay here. Let's not let him wind us, hear us, smell us, see us. And I know this afternoon he's going to come right back out, and we can make that approach. Education is going to create success to where we're eliminating excuses. Where all of a sudden, again, you see an animal go a certain area, you can say, hey, he's 5 miles from here. I saw with my spotting scope, but I know this little trail down here. Instead of bushwhacking and getting winded, let's make this nice approach. Again, education of the resource, knowing all the things that we talked about in here, bundle them together is going to answer all your questions when you're in the field, and it's going to make you a better hunter and hands down a more successful hunter. So keep it in mind, study through these, learn all these things, and get ready for the next step, which we're actually scouting in field, and we start breaking things down. We're going to take everything we learned here, putting boots on the ground, making sure what we saw digitally is actually true, making sure they are bedding grounds, making sure that there is water in that water source, making sure the grass is alive and green in those areas. So again, this is that phase 1, digital scouting. Up next will be in the field. But again, take the time right now, learn your unit inside and out through the digital process.